Hi everyone, this is Sharon. I have with me today my latest design team project for the Graphics Fairy. For this project, I did something a little different than my normal journal. I created a journal that has more about like a school theme, kind of a learning bookish theme to it. I used this antique book from 1903. It's called the Jones 4th Grade Reader. And to cinch it up, I just used a piece of old leather strapping. And I've added, for embellishment, this little embroidered kind of identification tag. I'm not sure what it was used for, but I've had some of these and I've been wanting to use them. I've also added onto here an optometrist test lens, and this is an old antique one as well. So if we remove that, you can see this is a very well-loved reader and it's got a really nice ornate cover to it, so I left that as is. It's got just a nice little motif on the back as well. It's 5 signatures, about 100 pages. And for the inside and the images, I've used quite a few bundles. I bet you in excess of probably 20 bundles from the premium membership site. And I will list most of the main ones that I've used. Pretty much anything with the word ephemera in it, I've used something from that. It just makes it so easy using their search tool to find what you're looking for if you just put in a few keywords. One of the main kits that are bundles that I used is this one. It's called 19th Century Phrenology, and there's this marbled paper book image, and that's what I used for my inside covers. This is not frilly in any way, shape, or form. It leans more toward the masculine side, I would say. There's no lace or flowery fabrics. I used a lot of just very textural linens and some plaids and wools and things like that. So if we step through, on this page, I created this pocket. This is from the Bibliophile Ephemera bundle. And in there, I created this tag. I just use a little piece of wool on the top. And here I layered up this background image with this lady. She reminds me of a school teacher. That's why I put her on there. An old invoice copy. I've mixed quite a number of antique and vintage book pages with some Tim Holtz paper, as well as some of the printables from the premium membership site. This is one of the original book pages from this book. Here I layered up a couple of items from the author bundle, like the blue. And on this page, I took this image of a book cover and cut it in two and made 2 side tucks out of those. So in here, I've got this image from that Phrenology bundle, and then on the back, I just stapled on some offcuts and scrap papers that I had, and then backed it with some old book page. And then also in that pocket, I tucked this is a page from an old ledger book that I have, and it's actually some, looks like algebra homework or geometry. And that was from the 1930s. I've used one of the printables from one of the bundles and this library checkout slip, and that just would make a nice place to journal, I think, or make lists. I really feel like this journal would be a good, like an organizer or planner kind of a journal. Here I used a book page from a vintage book on Italian architecture. And so I just put that in so that you can flip that up and see the whole page. And then here I used some decorative stitching from my sewing machine to adhere these bits of fabric. And then on this side in this pocket, I've got a couple of things. This is an antique book page from an 1800s book on bookkeeping. some nice typing on there. I really tried to focus in on lots of different fonts and scripts and things in this journal. Here I created a journaling spot from, this is an image from one of the map bundles. I love that blue. And I just stitched into that some images, did a little stenciling on this one, places to write in here. This is a printable, this inside sheet. And then I just added, stitched on a little piece of wool. On this page I made a fabric flip with this beautiful old textile. It's kind of a nubby linen. And you can see where, this is the right side actually, where they repaired it. But I really like the way this little patch looked on the back side, so I put that side up. Here I made a cluster from a little piece of ephemera and some linen and wool, and this is a vintage ticket. Here I made a little tuck out of this photographer's card. And then in there, I've got a piece of vintage ledger paper. And then this is an original postcard. I just thought this girl looked very studious with her book. I just embellished it with a stamp in the corner. Here I've got a couple of book pages, one from a bird book, and this is a shorthand book. And on that page, I just made this little journaling card, put some antique wallpaper on there, and made that with an old book page, arithmetic page. Now you might say, well, where do you journal on something like that? But for me, I would look at this and use either a blue or a red ink pen and write right over the top of that black printing on there. I think that would look neat. On this page, I use these ephemera images, stitch them in with some decorative stitching and wrap them around the outside of the page on each side. And then those create some nice belly bands where I tucked in these cards. And these I made from one single image. This image comes from the berries and cherries bundle. So I cut that in half and made 2 cards from that. Just kind of layered it up with the book page and added a couple of little tags on the corner. And then on the back, I wrapped this paper over and punched that out and then kind of cinched in there this piece of ledger paper. This one's the same, it's just got a couple of different tags on it. Here I adhered a piece of wool. And then on this page, I've got another one of those journaling spots that just kind of flips over the top of the page. Here I made a double tuck. I took a couple of the ephemera images and blew them up a little bit larger than what size they were in the bundle and stitched those together. So I created a tuck here and a tuck underneath. And in here, I've got some old school book pages from an arithmetic book. And this was a little piece of homework that was tucked into one of the old school books that I had. So I thought I'd just tuck that in there. Here's an example of a piece of ephemera that I just blew up to make it a page size. I like to do that sometimes too. It's fun to resize things and just kind of use them as you like in your journals. Here I created this side tuck from one of the images, and then in there I've got another page from an old school book. This was a primary reader, The Billy Goat Scruff. I remember reading that as a child. And then a couple of book pages in there as well. On this side of the page, I created a pocket from one of the check images. And in there, I created this little tag. So I used a piece of ledger paper and stamp that, wrap that all the way around. And then in there, I tucked these little items. These come from the author bundle, and just cut those out. And then on the back side, I just tucked in an extra piece of ledger paper that would have a place to write on the back. Did a little bit of stenciling on this masking paper. This is a fold out of a schoolhouse scene, and this comes from the back to school bundle. And on there I've got this tab, and I just attach this fun little dangle on there. And then on this side of the page there's lots of graph paper to work with. In the center I created this policy envelope type of thing, and I added these two little spots to twist my paper around so I can close it. And then I just did some collaging on there with antique wallpaper, a German book page, a piece of one of the ephemera bundles, and then I took cheesecloth and edged the front of the envelope and just did some decorative stitching on there. And this is the collaging on the back side. And then what I did was I made some gussets. I lined it with this piece from Antique Titles Pages bundle. And then I made my gussets with some cheesecloth, which I like to do because the cheesecloth is thin but strong, so it doesn't take up, doesn't cause a lot of bulk in there, but gives you that extra room in there. And in there I created this document holder. So I kind of cinched this up at the top with some staples, and then trimmed that up with some of that antique wallpaper. And for the back side of that, I used this beautiful page from the Typesetter bundle. And then in there, I've got a piece of ledger paper, and then blank on the back to do some writing. In this pocket, I have another tag where I just stapled on a picture of a typewriter and a watch. And then on the back, I created a very shallow pocket with some of that leftover marble paper that I used elsewhere, and then just tucked a little card in there. On this side of the page, I created a side tuck with this image. It's kind of a really dark green, but I just love the way that looks with this black and green image from this book. And then here's some more graph paper to use for writing, little cluster at the top, some scripty images that I've used throughout. This is a page from a botanical book that I have. Another book page, and then on there I've clipped this envelope that I created from one of the antique title pages. And I just backed that with a piece of a book page. And then in there, I created this journaling card from this ledger book image. It was really tall and narrow, so what I did was fold the bottom up and created a pocket on the back and just stitched up the sides. Then I just tucked in some offcuts from some of my ledger papers and backed it with some antique wallpaper. This is also in that clip I tucked the title page from this particular book. On this page, I created a top tuck, and I created a little bit differently than I normally do. I have this image that I wrapped around the page, and if you unwrap that, it opens up into this map, and then I back that with marble paper. It's just kind of a fun, different little way to create a tuck at the top of the page. In there, I put this vintage envelope, and in there I've got this antique postcard from 1903, and I just embellished that a little bit. I didn't want to cover up all the pretty writing that's on there. So in the center of this signature, I created a couple of, oh, they could be called cabinet cards or tags, I guess, but I really like the way they turned out. I used this frame from the Gilded Age bundle, and I just absolutely love that frame. And I layered it up with a couple of these stereo card images. This one is also from the Gilded Age bundle, and this one came from Cicerita Jones. So I cut out the ovals on the frames, and then I just made a little slit in the bottom where I could put this ribbon in and then top it off with a wax seal. And then on the backs, I just lined them with ledger paper and did a little collaging. On this page, I clipped this little coffee-dyed tea bag and embellished that a little bit. And then in there, I've got this original calling card. On this page, I clipped in, made kind of a little pocket out of a ledger paper sheet so I could tuck this little booklet in there. In this, I made from some of the various images in some of the bundles, and then just tied that up with some string and created this little book. This is one of the original book pages from this book that I'm using, and then I just have some other miscellaneous papers in here. Put the straw paper in the middle for writing. That's kind of fun. On this page, I folded the page in because it was a little too wide, and I punched the edge of it and put some German book page on there and wrapped it around the edge. That folds out, and there's this beautiful image of this wise old owl, which I love, and that's from the Bibliophile Ephemera bundle. And in there, I tucked this scripty image. And then on the back, I just did a little bit of stenciling on there. On this signature page, I took some of this wool fabric and just wrapped it around and cinched it on with this brad, and then just added a paper button on there. Here in this pocket, I've got another little journaling spot. I used some of the antique music sheet images from one of the bundles to create the front and the back. And then there's some spaces to write in the inside here. This is a ledger sheet that's a printable from one of the bundles. And then in the center here, I've got this map of Berlin from one of the map bundles. And what I did was I created these tabs on the side and these little eyelets here so that I could tie these strings. And you'll see that there's just like a kind of a fun little private pocket on the inside here. I stuck a little bit of German scrap and this calling card. This is an original. Mrs. Polly Young's. And then on this side, it's also tied. What I did was I just put the strings through the eyelet and then tied a bow on the other side. But you can pull those out to reveal what's on the back side. And then in this pocket, I made this envelope, and in there I made and cut out all these fun little ephemera pieces from the junk journaling bundle. Just stuck those in there. This page is kind of fun. I have a 1945 high school yearbook, so I took one of the pages and made a little side tuck out of that. And then in there, I've got some ephemera, this check from New Zealand, from the wonderful Kate at Pixie K Designs, and an arithmetic book page in there. And that takes us to the back side. So I hope you enjoyed that flip through today. I had a lot of fun working with all of these bookish school kind of pieces of ephemera and subject matter, and it was something a little different for me, so I really enjoyed it. Thanks for coming along with me, and until next time, bye-bye.